This is the DestinyWell Lab Interpretation Guide for the testosterone profile. The synthesis of steroid hormones is a complex process. They're all very closely interrelated. So I want to show you this complex diagram so you can get some sense of how male hormones like the testosterone and androgens and female hormones like the estrogen hormones are related to the precursor pathways as well as related to the production and the use of cortisol in the body. It all starts with cholesterol. If you don't have enough cholesterol, your cholesterol level gets too low, or you take medicines that drastically lower your cholesterol, then you may actually not have enough precursor to make the steroid hormones you need. Your testosterone levels or your estrogen levels may go down, and that may decrease your well-being. Cholesterol is metabolized first to pregnenolone, and then it goes by a couple different pathways. One over to 17-hydroxy pregnenolone, and the other down to progesterone. Progesterone is one of the main female hormones. And then from there, it can go to 17-hydroxyprogesterone. That can also come from the other pathway. Now, a critical thing to know is that if you're under major stress, your body thinks it needs cortisol. It needs cortisol to regulate its salt and water balance and to survive on a minute-to-minute hourly basis. So if you are under an acute stress, if you're in a car accident, you have a heart attack, you're being chased by a lion, your body knows it has to crank that up to deal with the stress, to decrease inflammation on an emergency basis to raise your blood sugar. If, however, you're not in that emergency situation, but you respond the same way to chronic stress, like your boss in the office, or chronic financial difficulties, or relationship problems, or you're just an ultra worrier and you keep yourself in stress mode all the time, then your cortisol level will stay high. That does two things. One, cortisol itself is good in the short term, but in the long term, it's damaging. It can decrease the hippocampus, the area in your brain associated with incorporation of memory. It can decrease the quality of the bacteria in your gut and the lining of your gut. It can lead to certain side effects like insulin resistance and raising your blood sugar, leading to prediabetes and diabetes. It can raise your blood pressure, and it can suppress your immune system over time. Cortisol is converted to cortisone in inactive form, and that happens more when you have insulin resistance, obesity, fatty liver, things associated with diabetes. But then it can serve as a reservoir, the cortisone, that's converted back into cortisol and keeps the level high. So if your body thinks it's in an emergency situation, you get what's called the cortisol steal. All the precursor hormones that start with cholesterol and come down that pathway are sucked into cortisol so that you can survive on a minute-to-minute basis. Well, what does that do to your other hormones? Well, if it all goes to cortisol, then there's nothing that goes through the pathway of DHEA and androstenedione. Those are the pathways that lead to production of testosterone and male hormones, and they lead to the production of estrogen and female hormones. So DHEA is a very important precursor molecule. It's a mild androgen. It's one of the most common hormones we have in the bloodstream, and it's made by the adrenal glands. Now, people who take DHEA often get improved well-being because there are receptors in the brain that respond to that. It helps muscle mass and helps overall well-being. That's fine on the short-term basis, but if you keep dumping DHEA in, you really have no idea what's going to happen. Some of it may go down into the estrogen pathways, so if you're a man and you're taking it to have more muscle strength, you may end up with more estrogen and estrogenic side effects like enlarged breasts or changes in your emotion. If you're a woman and you're taking DHEA at a dose that's too high, you may end up converting it to testosterone and male-type hormones, or the DHEA itself at higher doses can have masculinizing effects like changes and deepening in your voice, increased acne, hair growth places you don't want, and clitoral enlargement. So all these things are related, and they can convert back and forth. If you have significant insulin resistance or you're overweight, then it activates an enzyme called aromatase. And aromatase converts testosterone into E2 or estradiol, which is the strongest estrogen hormone, leading to those female-type side effects. If you're a woman and you have insulin resistance, then the lyase pathways from progesterone to 17-hydroxyprogesterone lead to more androstenedione that can also lead to the increases in testosterone, as is seen in conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome. So you can see all of these are terribly interrelated in a complex way, and different factors from your use of alcohol to your body habitus to whether you take external hormones like DHEA or estrogen or testosterone, they can all affect each other. So taking testosterone, if you don't block the pathways, can lead to increased estradiol or estrogen. And so we need to know the effects of all the things that we're doing, and we need to understand that they're complex and they're interrelated. And the more we understand these, the more we can get to the result that we actually want. Cortisol is a key hormone. It's a life and death hormone. When you're stressed, when you're chased by a lion, when things are desperate in your life, then you make more cortisol. You're in a car accident, you have a heart attack, your body needs to mobilize everything for an emergency. That cranks up your cortisol. So cholesterol goes to pregnenolone and progesterone. Both of those lead to intermediate hormones, 17-hydroxypregnenolone and 17-hydroxyprogesterone. From there, they go to deoxycortisol and then to cortisol itself. Every cell in the body needs cortisol. In an emergency, it's great. It raises your blood sugar, it suppresses your immune system so that you use all of your capacity for flight or fight rather than building things. So it breaks down proteins, it breaks down sugar in storage forms, and it mobilizes you for an emergency, which in an emergency is a great thing. But when you don't have an emergency, when you have a situation where your body's interpreting it as an emergency in our modern culture, you don't get along with your boss, your job is stressful, you have financial difficulties, there's relationship issues or stress where you're living, and your body interprets that as an emergency, then you have sustained high levels of cortisol. Those sustained high levels can break down muscle, they can change the lining of the gut and the integrity of the gut membrane so that you have a leaky gut. They change the health and the character of the microbiome. They make areas of your brain like the hippocampus, which is important for short-term memory incorporation, they make those areas shrink. So an emergency on a long-term basis is not a good thing. But when your body perceives it's in trouble, it shunts as much cholesterol and as many precursors as possible into cortisol. Now, cortisol has one other thing that can happen to it. It can get turned into the inactive cortisone form. Cortisone serves as a reservoir, and so people who have insulin resistance, they have VAT or visceral adipose tissue, fat around the middle, people with diabetes, folks like that are more likely to have high levels of cortisone. The cortisone serves as a reservoir, and so when cortisol goes down, it gets converted back from cortisone to keep it high. So people in that situation may have sustained higher levels of cortisol. So that's the pathway from cholesterol to your emergency hormone cortisol, which is important at moderate levels for function on a day-to-day basis and is used as an emergency situation hormone for things that come up. The first part of this pathway we're going to break down is the estrogen hormone part of the pathway. Again, things start with cholesterol, and they end up at three different estrogens: estrone, estradiol, and estriol. E2, or estradiol, is the strongest of these, the one that's the principal circulating hormone before menopause and is made in the ovaries by women. There's estrone, which is a weaker hormone, and there's estriol, which is also a weaker hormone that comes from estradiol as a less active metabolite. So it starts with cholesterol and goes to pregnenolone and to progesterone. As we said, progesterone is important in both men and women for function of the nervous system. It's helpful for sleep, and it helps with healing of tissues when they're injured. You can go to 17-hydroxypregnenolone or 17-hydroxyprogesterone. Both of those go to the weak androgens DHEA and androstenedione. DHEA, dihydroepiandrosterone, is an androgenic molecule. It's one of the most common hormones in circulation. It's made by the adrenal glands, and it's a precursor made into a lot of other things. It peaks in around the 20s, and then as you get older, the levels gradually go down. Now, if you just take exogenous or external DHEA, it will improve your sense of well-being. It'll help muscle mass a little bit. There are receptors in the brain that respond to this. And so a lot of times people say, well, take some DHEA, it'll help you feel better. And it might. But the problem with pouring in a precursor molecule like DHEA is you never know where it's going to go. So you pour in a high dose of this. If you're a man, some of it may get metabolized into the estrogens like estrone and through testosterone to estradiol. And if you're a woman, it may go into the testosterone pathway. So let's say you're a man, you take some DHEA. Initially, you get a high dose of that in your system. You get more well-being. You may make some more muscle and feel better. But if you metabolize a lot of it into estrogens, you may get some loss of muscle mass. You may get development of breast tissue. You may get changes in emotional situations and how you feel that you weren't expecting. The opposite is true in women, is if you pour in a bunch of DHEA, you probably will get some increased well-being. You might get a little bit of muscle boost, but additionally, you can metabolize that into male hormones. And so if you increase your testosterone or some of the other androgens by doing that, you can get acne, you can get deepening of the voice, you can get other changes or even enlargement of the clitoral area. And so there are a lot of different things that can happen by messing with these precursors. So in general, cholesterol through the progesterone pathways go to the intermediates, and then they're converted to the weak estrogen estrone, and then through testosterone to estradiol. That's where most of it happens in the ovaries. It's directly produced as estradiol and released there. After menopause, estradiol comes from aromatization of some of the adrenal precursors, the DHEA and androstenedione, and so there is less of the estradiol and more of the E1 and E2 hormones following menopause. Now let's take a look at the testosterone or androgen side of the pathway. Again, it begins at cholesterol. Cholesterol has the ring structure that can be made into any of the steroid hormones. It always goes through pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is the initial sex steroid-related metabolite, and that can be turned into progesterone, into the estrogen family, or into the testosterone and androgens. So from pregnenolone, it can go to progesterone. Progesterone also has important functions in men in the neurologic tissues and also for healing. Both pregnenolone and progesterone have 17-hydroxy metabolites, so pregnenolone goes to 17-hydroxypregnenolone and progesterone goes to 17-hydroxyprogesterone. Those can be converted respectively into DHEA and into androstenedione. DHEA can go through intermediates into testosterone, and androstenedione can go directly to testosterone. So both of these pathways ultimately lead to testosterone. We've talked about DHEA as well having important roles. Both DHEA and androstenedione have testosterone-like effects, but they're much weaker, although they do circulate in high levels because they're some of the main hormones made by the adrenal gland, especially DHEA. It's a major precursor molecule. When we give DHEA from the outside, we get increased well-being because there are receptors in the brain that it fits into and helps with overall feeling and how you're doing. It also helps with muscle mass. But like we discussed previously, DHEA can go unpredictably into different pathways. It can end up as estrogens in men, and it can end up as testosterone in women. So the main pathway from cholesterol to testosterone is through the progesterone metabolites, through the weak androgens DHEA and androstenedione, to testosterone itself. Now let's look at these pathways put back together again. It all starts with cholesterol. So if your cholesterol level is too low, you may not be able to make enough cortisol or any of the sex steroid hormones. So we've set the norms at DestinyWell for our optimal zone at a range where you'll have enough cholesterol to make all of these hormone molecules. They go through the progesterones, and then it goes to cortisol when you need it. Now you need a bit of cortisol all the time, but if your body's either chronically stressed, you always perceive it's an emergency, or you really do go through serious emergencies like a car accident or a major surgery, then the body diverts massive amounts of cortisol on a sustained basis into the flight or fight mode. So it'll take all those precursors and shunt things down to cortisol. That's called the cortisol steal. You take everything you have, you put it into life or death reactions. That leaves a lot less molecules to get turned into the estrogens and into testosterone. So your sexual function, your sexual development, your ability to reproduce, all of those go down substantially when it's a life and death situation. So the more we can send our signals for life and death just when there are emergencies rather than all the time from chronic stress, the better and healthier our other hormone pathways will be. If you have a lot of inflammation in your system, then in women, that turns on the 1720 lyase pathway and converts progesterone into androgen metabolites and testosterone. That's what happens in things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, where the 1720 lyase is turned on. That's turned on by things like insulin resistance and abnormal glucose metabolism. And then it's also true that in men, When there's insulin resistance and obesity and visceral adipose around the middle, fat tissue around the belly, that the aromatase enzyme is turned on. That converts testosterone into the most active estrogen, E2 estradiol. And so men then get estrogen type effects when they're stressed from turning on the aromatase. So overall, we can see these pathways are very closely interrelated. How our stress is, how our precursors are, how the balance in our life is, as well as our glucose metabolism and our body habitus. All these play together to determine the balance of hormones we have and our overall state of health. Testosterone is a powerful and controversial hormone. It's the main male hormone responsible for secondary sexual characteristics, such as development of the genitalia, hair growth, muscle mass, and sexual function. The response to different testosterone levels is highly individual. Some people can have very low testosterone levels and have no symptoms at all, be totally fine in terms of sexual function, and their muscle mass even seems normal. Other people can be high and be in a similar situation where they have no symptoms at all and seem to be totally fine. On the other hand, as a group, when people's testosterone gets below 300 to 400, they often will lose energy, they'll become more emotional, they lose muscle mass, and their sexual function may decline. When men's testosterone gets too high, they may become more aggressive, and they also get side effects such as increased production of red blood cells. This leads to thickening in the blood in a condition called polycythemia that sets you up for increased risk of stroke and heart attack and other conditions when blood doesn't flow appropriately. At DestinyWell, we believe the optimal testosterone range is probably in the 500 to 700 area, and that values over 1,000 are too high, with 700 to 1,000 probably okay for many people, but possibly a little on the high side. In evolutionary times, when people exercised more, had more muscle mass, and ate a higher meat diet and lived more outdoors, it's possible that many men had a higher testosterone level of 700 to 1,000 or even over 1,000. But in today's society, 500 to 700 is a reasonable target because most people feel fine and function fine at that level. 400 to 500 we consider moderately low, and less than 400 is too low. There are a number of diet and lifestyle things you can do that will change your testosterone or boost it without taking external hormones. This graph shows that testosterone varies over time. It tends to peak around age 20, it's going up rapidly in adolescence, and then it gradually drifts down over the years to much lower levels. So peak levels in the 20s are maybe twice as high as they are for people who are 80 or 90. There are natural ways to raise testosterone without taking testosterone hormone. Weight training is a very good one. The more you build muscle mass, the higher it raises your testosterone. HIIT training, or high-intensity interval training, is also good. As opposed to long-range running or jogging, HIIT training is exercising to maximum tolerance for 30 to 60 seconds, resting for 30 to 60 seconds, and then repeating the cycle 7 to 10 times. Avoiding sugar and alcohol helps raise testosterone, as does decreasing stress. As we showed in the steroidogenesis pathways, the more stress you're under, the more the body thinks it's an emergency to make more cortisol. Cortisol is our survival stress hormone. But if you think you're under stress all the time and you keep sending the signals to make more and more cortisol, you have less precursors to turn into testosterone, so your testosterone level is low. And decreasing that stress decreases the signal to build cortisol and leaves more to build testosterone and other hormones. Garlic and avocado can help increase testosterone levels, as can cold showers or swimming in cold water. James Bond apparently did this as a tradition. Also, having sex or sexual activity increases your testosterone as well. The DestinyWell testosterone profile includes one test, a total testosterone level. At DestinyWell, we've been extremely fortunate to find some amazingly good coaches, people with backgrounds of success in varied fields who bring all sorts of resources and talent and skill to help you. These folks have many years of clinical experience, and they know how to be of assistance at every step of the way, from motivation to connecting you with the right resources to finding things that you need to get you on your journey. To learn more, go to destinywell.com/coaching to meet our team and find out how they can be of service to you.